Hi there, Lindsay Upton the Quilt Queen here. I'm just taking you on a wee tour of some of the quilts that have caught my attention during 2024 Festival of Quilts. So this first one, and I may have to switch the camera view to show you, is gorgeous. This one has won the prize for excellence in long arm quilting overlay award, and it is absolutely exquisite. Here's the full view, and close up it is an absolute delight. Tiny little stitches, as you can see, gorgeous effect by the thread, and you cannot see a single little tuft, so she must have gone to a great trouble to hide them. It's a well-deserved winner. Now, I have to confess that I don't always agree with the judges' choice in Best of Show, but this year it is absolutely exquisite. It's called Dear Humans, and I'll take you to see the label in a minute. It's just fabulous. It's a combination of, I think, applique, I may be wrong, and thread painting, and the stitching is fantastic. Here's the maker. Here's just some of the stitching highlighting around the animals. It's mind-blowing. I'm not going to show you every single competition winning quilt, but this one is also incredible, of the traditional quilts, and I didn't even realise until I got up close that it appears that it's totally hand stitched, and it is fantastic. The detail is incredible, and the maker of this is Japanese. Of course, it's not all about winners at this show. This is an exhibition pretty much of where quilting began in England, and the colours are a bit faded, as you can see. The judges might pick this one up if it was in a show these days, because it looks as though it's a little squished in at the bottom, but they are lovely, and they probably would have been made from dress fabrics. The other very interesting thing about Festival of Quilts is all the side galleries. Now, this is a show by Amy Pabst, and I have never seen such insanely tiny pieces. It says on the label that it's 32 by 39 centimetres, and there are 5,400 pieces. And there's not just one, but an entire gallery full of them. Do you know what? It's really fascinating to see how far quilters have come in their journey. This is Janice Gunner's first quilt, which she has put on the wall. It's from 1974, and it's really interesting because we go through all sorts of styles and colours right through here. Let me see if I can find one of them. This is 2018, so a very different style indeed. These were done in the late 90s. Isn't it interesting to see how things evolve? Something else that Festival of Quilts is known for are its tutor areas, and this is Philippa Naylor's. She's got an online course called Quilters Question Time, all about precision quilting and piecing. So here are just some of her teaching examples. I'm in the competition area now, and I am not going to march you up and down every single one because there's a lot of quilts on Instagram, and I did do a little speedy tour on my scooter, which I have to confess wasn't very good. Anyway, this one is in the sustainable quilt category, which means that they've pretty much used repurposed materials, and I think this is probably ties by Julia MacLeod. Here's just a glimpse at some of the things people come up with for pictorial quilts. I think this one's very funny. It's called Pigs in Blankets. And over here we have DJ Birds, I would say. This pictorial quilt has received a judge's award. It's in a very muted colour palette with shadows, but it's so effective. I'll show you who it is by There we go. And then we have the wacky, some squirrels, pigeons and a rabbit, it would seem, having a picnic with their camper van. The art quilt category is always very diverse. Here's a slightly potty one called A Stitch in Time Saves 9. And there's some sort of creature. Well, I thought they were sewing first of all, but they seem to be in charge of a clock. But the quilting is gorgeous. I guess you'd call this quite avant-garde. It's made with quite grannified prints, but quite a cool message on it, I dare say. In the art category, we also have things that look just like paintings. This one's called Wave by Bara Bartasova. I hope I got that right. The two-person category quilting section's always quite interesting because it might be something that one person has pieced and a long armour has finished off, maybe with a pantograph like this, or even if we go over here, this is highly custom quilted. It's Sandy Chandler, and I do apologise, somebody's name has got chopped off. Here's another two-person quilt, pieced by one person, quilted by another. Beautiful quilting, as you can see. Here are the makers. Here's a two-person quilt that's got people talking. They cannot quite work out if it's applique or fabric painting. Very well done, so it's tricky to figure out what they've done here. Fantastic colour gradient. Simple quilting, but extremely effective. Here's who it's by. I didn't think I'd try and pronounce that. The thing I've always objected to slightly in some of the galleries at Festival of Quilts is that the lighting can be a bit hit and miss. It's actually better here on the phone, but the layers and textures on this are really interesting. I'll take you in closer. It's got some sparkly bit. Still in art quilts, we have something that looks like a very neatly done log cabin, but you don't really get the full effect until you zoom out. And as you can see, it's a face. Speaking of faces, here are a few more, beautifully fabric painted and enhanced by stitch. Hi. This person. And now we've got two very different portrait quilts. This one seems to be almost entirely thread painting. Here. And this one. We have. This is a very eye-catching quilt in the art category. Shows how it can be difficult to blur the lines between the categories. Personally, I might have put it in the modern section. It's incredibly vibrant. It's a bit like an Amish quilt, but modernised. Now, this one couldn't be more politically apt because all of this week we've had far-right uprisings in many British cities. It was a little bit difficult at the beginning to work out if this person was being ironic or not. They are, but it's quite incredible, and I love these 3D letters. Here's a very modern two-person quilt. It's like a version of Pride that I've never seen before. By contrast, in the two-person category, we have quilts that are far more traditional. This one is by these folk. This one caught my eye because it reminded me of my quilt that I did a few years ago called Purda. It's like the stone screens that you might see in some of the Indian palaces. And in this case, the makers are there. Now for something completely different in the art category. It is called Skin on Skin, And I have to say, it does look like skin. I believe it's actually latex. Let me go out. Certainly gets you thinking. This one in the art category shows that you don't have to have a bed-shaped quilt. This one is created in a whole load of sections, and they've managed to get it to hang remarkably straight, considering it's got so many cutout parts. Made by those people. Now, I love contemporary quilts because they're a more modern version of what you might find traditionally, and when I zoom out you'll see it's kind of Indian in inspiration, I think, but the hand stitching and ornamentation is fab. Here's another one in the contemporary section called Sisterhood, very much with feminist words all over it. Some are printed, some are hand stitched. It's very cool. There are all sorts of things in the contemporary category that stem from traditional, but they've got a more up-to-date twist to them. So this basically is a whole cloth quilt, but it's done in a colour that you wouldn't have come across in the 18th or 19th century, and rather than being hand stitched, as you can see, it's heavily machine stitched. This contemporary quilt has got an incredibly modern composition, but the elements are definitely traditional. We've got flying geese and little circles, some trapunto, here's a contemporary quilt that you might say, is that not traditional? It's got vintage doilies and such, but you know, because it's done by machine, I guess, it's just more modernised. Here's the maker. Now I'm definitely in the modern category. It looks like they've taken a double wedding ring block and deconstructed it very cleverly. It's called Ruby Plus 10 by Chris Harvey. I confess I don't always understand the definition of the categories, but I think one of the things that modern quilts have are solid colours. Let's just have a quick swoop. Here's another modern quilt that I really like. The colours remind me of Amish quilts, and it's very simple, but I guess again deconstructed cleverly. This quilt is in the traditional category, and I would say that it was inspired by Hawaiian applique. Let's look in closer. The quilting is all echo quilting, and oh my goodness, it's hand stitched. Here's another traditional quilt, and as you can see, it's set out in blocks, but when you get in closer you realise that most of the flowers are 3D. And the maker of this one is there. It's easy to get lost in amongst the quilts in the competition section at Festival because sometimes the aisles chop and change. So I'm back into modern with some fabulous blousey flowers. Let's go in closer. Got all sorts of materials here. What a fantastic border that is. Here's the maker. And then we go to this one, which is a very groovy shape. Some wonderful quilting on it. If I go back in, you'll see who made this one. This modern quilt reminds me of stained glass technique because you've got the black highlight. It's pretty cool. Speaking of stained glass, how about this one? It's sheer. Here's a contemporary quilt with the most incredible amount of hand stitching. Let's have a look at the whole thing. back to a couple of modern quilts. This one looks like there was a gust of wind or an explosion while the person was putting the pieces together. There's a relatively new category here at Festival of Quilts called Joy of Sharing, and it's people who are very happy to have their quilts displayed, but maybe they didn't feel brave enough to put it into the actual competition. But there are all sorts of lovely quilts here, and the maker of this one is there. Now we're in the slightly mind-blowing miniature category. They're not meant to be any larger than 12 by 12 inches and to scale as well. Teeny tiny stitching. I do like this caramel wafer wrapper. And here's another fun category, the group quilts. This one is Beatles themed. You might be able to pick out some recognisable tunes. And it's by this group. So this is Quilt Creations, which has always been a rather favourite category of mine. I do rather wish that they would separate the garments out from the 3D items. So we've got everything from fold-out books, fairy tale castles, 3D flowers, soft furnishings, to bags and jacket. And then we have items that could well have been carved from stone, but they're fabric. A bicycle wheel, a mask, and a set of wings. Here we are in a little side gallery near the competition quilts, and this is a retrospective of some of the quilts over the years that have won the Visitor's Choice Award. Try and get all the way around. If you buy a VIP ticket, you get this special little area with bunting, nice tables, and I think they've got their own coffee bar. I bet it's gin, really. If you're in charge of a quilt group or a guild, you might want to come and see tutors and see if they'll do workshops for you. And here they are with their little booths, setting out their wares, giving you some idea of the things that they teach.
Hello Sharon, how are you?
In addition to classes that you can book in academies, lectures, that kind of thing, we've got the live creative textiles studio where you can have a go at messy printing and stuff like that. There are obviously many shopping opportunities here at Festival of Quilts, from fabrics and dressmaking stuff to hand printed things, patterns, machines, scissors. It's still early, but as you can see, there's a designated place for young quilters to drop in and do workshops. There are places that do demos, there's shopping opportunities for absolutely everything textile related that you can think of. Here we are, quite early on in the day, on the main Bonina stand, themed this year in purple to match their new humongous machine, which I shall take you to see. I haven't really had a chance to play with it yet. But it can do embroidery, sewing, gigantic stitches, you name it, it can do it. It doesn't actually make the coffee, but that's okay. Here are the Sunday morning visitors streaming in. I hope they're all going to buy something nice. It's not just about quilting here, you can make little creatures.
Oh no, what did he do?
Just look at this cute little Scotty dog applique. This is one of the cutting dies that you can get from Quilt Direct, who sell all the AccuQuilt stuff. I think it's really cute. It's terribly tempting that for the last few days we've been ogling the Tilda fabrics. I'm sure something will have to go home with me. And here we are back at the Bonina UK long arm stand, where I and the lovely Nicholas will be very happy to help you with all of your queries.
Everybody, I am here at Festival of Quilts with the lovely Lindsay, and we're in the contemporary section, and this is my quilt. It's
brilliant.
This is called Confetti and Streamers, and it's from my new book, Use and Ornament. And in that book, there are 8 quilts, all made for different reasons. So to celebrate something, to protest against something. And this particular quilt is made just to celebrate my love of colour and improv piecing. So I've used all of my favourite colours. I've put all of these irregular shapes together and then added little pops of contrast with this awesome black and white stripe. And very densely matched it, quilted it, and left the wonky edge, which I love on quilts. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicholas, that was wonderful. So here's a special gallery that really took my interest. It's Sydney Snell, and the quilts are amazing. They've got this kind of watercolour felty effect, and the quilting's not complicated. The colours are really cool, and they all seem to, well, some of them are based off photographs, I would say. This one looks like a street scene, whereas others are more abstract. But they've just got this wonderful effect. For example, this is definitely a New York street scene, probably in the rain. And it's because they've been washed that they've got this extra dimension or crinkly texture. Here's one that would appear to me to be a floral composition. Let's look in close. And I love the ambiguity of this one. First of all, I thought it was an octopus, but it's actually called red laces, so I think it must be shoes. Of course, eventually all things have to come to an end and materials run out. As you can see, we've got the bobbin flashing, warning us that we're about to run out of thread. Must be nearly the end of the show. Hope you've enjoyed the tour. See you next year.